and they don't know they're being a wall, then you could use them.
Oh, but if they know they're being a wall,
we didn't get to the sugi yet, so we'll have to learn those halachas.
So when we say meretzim vant,
deer.
Yeah.
So why? 1 second. If you're traveling, and I don't know if you've ever traveled, and you're desperate for a sukkah, what's wrong with using a horse? If I could use a horse as one of the walls, I don't. By the way, Dave, to answer without getting into Hasidic pshat, I don't think it's possible. You can't get an answer out of pshat about making the wall. The sukkah wall in general is such a lofty concept, and the Gemara is grappling with how to make the walls.
Right.
Love it.
So it represents the Ananei covered, and we want to use an elephant, okay, to represent the Ananei covered. What kind of
I think it's to create a spiritual oasis in a very material world. And what Hashem is telling you is, what you make the walls out of is your business. I don't care how you're able to cordon off an area. If you want to use an animal, use an animal. You want to use a tree, use a tree. Make it out of everything you want.
So everything else
has to be kosher.
We're not only kosher, we have the idea of noise sukkah, right? We have the idea of an esrog should be a creates hadar, okay? All these ideas, they're not transferable to the actual wall of a sukkah?
To some people, putting up the black stallion, a beautiful horse, that might be his prized possession.
Let's say a beautiful horse that is constipated. Okay, we have to use
if it's constipated, it's good. The problem is if it's loose, you got a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Okay, it's dying. But we're talking about any animal.
Listen, I know that my wife would, if I would have a hippopotamus as a wall, come dessert, my wife says, if you eat that cheesecake, you're going to look like the hippopotamus. And I'm going to tell her back, what are you talking about? All the hippopotamus eats all day's lettuce. So if anything, go eat the lettuce, I'm going to look like a hippopotamus.
Anyway, that's my 2 cents here. That's right. I can't take these blots seriously when they talk about behemoths for walls.
Talking about the behemoths, and a person is called an Adam because he's created from the Adama. So the question is, Rabbi Gold asked this week, because in the Parsha Krishna, Adam is Adama. Why is an Adam called Adam because he's made from the Adama? Why isn't a behemoth called an Adam because a behemoth is made from the Adama? What's up as a human? So he was masber beautifully. The person is named after Adama because a person needs to know that all he is raw material. Rebbeinu created him in Adama, is raw material. But Adama, earth on its own is useless. But if you cultivate it, and you could make beautiful things out of it, or you can make beautiful things grow out of it. That's how an Adam works. We are the raw material. We're like Adam, but we have tremendous potential if we work out what we have. Mashek in the Behema is ba ma. Whatever it is already in it when it's created. It doesn't improve. It doesn't develop. It's what it is. We could develop ourselves and become better, and that's what Rabbi Gold said. That's what Rabbi Gold said from Afula. Why we're called Adam from Adam. So Bama means what you see is what you get. That's perfect for a wall. A person would be like a transforming wall. Okay. I think,
doesn't address my question.
No, it doesn't. It's called is a distraction.
Somebody writing a get on an animal that you were okay with?
Who says I'm okay with it?
So, no, Moshe Stern said beautiful. The reason why he writes his get on the animal is because he knows his wife is terrified of dogs. So he Bedafka writes to get on the dog and tells his wife, here, you can have it. And she said, no, I don't want it. That's all part of the tormenting.
Right. Just a torment.
I think you're not looking at animals properly. That's the issue. You're just seeing them as a hint or as a behemoth. You said behemoth. An oreled. That's not.
So are we up to the Mishnah on Daf Chav Beis and Beis? I think that's what we're up to.
A bays on a bays.
Was it Vav Gimel on a base?
Of Dalit on Aleph.
Oh, it's Vav Dalet off. Oh, okay. I was. Thank you for reminding me. I would have went backwards. Okay. Oh, so we're in the middle of an important sugya here.
We just did. All we did was the kasha Rameir. We're up to the kasha.
So we really have to. We have to refresh our memories of what we're talking about. So what we're talking about is we know there's a halacha in the Mishnah. Reb Meir says that. Reb Meir says, no, it's not in the Mishnah, it's brought down in the Gemara on Daf Gimel Amud Aleph at the bottom. Reb Meir says that you're not allowed to use an animal as a wall of the sukkah. Oh, that's how it all started. Oh. You're not allowed to use an animal for wall of a sukkah. And there's a machloikis between Abaya and I believe Reb Huna, or is it Reb Zeir? I think it's Reb Zeir. What is the reason for Reb Meir? Abaya said the reason for Reb Meir is he's afraid the animal's going to die. Reb Zeir said he's afraid the animal's going to run away. And the Gemara said, if you're afraid that the animal's going to die, you're also afraid that it's going to run away. However, if you're afraid that the animal's going to run away, you might not necessarily be afraid that the animal will die. And therefore, according to Abaye, if you had an elephant, the whole shaila is the Gemara wants to maybe it'll sit down. So the Gemara says no, it has to be speaking where the animal is suspended. You had not an elephant, you had like a horse, where its body itself is not tetvachim high. So if it dies, it's going to be too small. So you have an animal, it's suspended from the air so that it can't sit down. Its legs have some screening around it, because otherwise the wall will be open on the bottom. And the top of the horse is 7 tvachim and a mashu within 3 tvachim of the schach. And you're using the concept of a lavud to close that gap. If the animal dies, it'll contract a little bit, and now your animal will be more than 3 tvachim from the schach, and therefore the sukkah will be possible. So if you're choshish that it could die, then only then is there a problem. Is there a problem? But according to Reb
Why isn't
Zera,
it good till it dies?
I'm sorry?
Why isn't it good till it dies?
Oh, so the reason why we don't allow it is we're afraid it's going to die. It'll contract a drop, and you're more than 3 tvachim, and you might not notice it. And then you're sitting in a non-kosher sukkah.
You won't notice that
the horse that dies.
That your stallion died. Okay.
I guess not. I'm not sure how that works, but that's what the Gemara says. Maybe it was like a dormant type of stallion. You probably wouldn't use your best racing horse as the wall of your sukkah. You probably have a horse that's like a klapta ishan already, is half dead, and that's the horse that you use. So that horse is not very active to begin with. You can't really tell. But Reb Zera held Reb Meir would be matter in such a case, because since it can't run away, we're not worried about it dying. So at the end of the day, Abaya holds that according to the Tana Reb Meir, we're choshid that people die or animals die. So the Gemara wanted to challenge Abaye. Abaye is learning that Meir is chayish l'misa, and Rabbi Yehuda is not chayish l'misa. The Gemara brought down 2 mishnayos that seem to be contradictory. A Bas Yisrael who's married to a Kohen is allowed to eat truma, but if her husband dies and she doesn't have any children, she can no longer eat truma. So what happens if you have a Bas Yisrael who's married to a Kohen and he travels far away, and we don't know, we can't verify that he's alive or not. We can assume that he's alive. We don't assume that he died, and therefore she can continue to eat truma even though her husband's on the way on this business trip. There's another brayta that says if a Kohen gives his wife, who's a Yisraelis, a get, and says it should be chal an hour before I die, because he wants to release her from chalitza, and he's gone, or even if he's there, if he gives her such a get, she could never eat truma again, because you always have to be choshed that he's going to die in an hour, and then she's not married to a kohen anymore. So we have 2 brises, we have a Mishnah brisa that are contradictory. One says you don't have to worry he's going to die. One says you do have to worry he's going to die. So how did Abaye square up these 2 Mishnahs? He says they're according to different Tanoim. Reb Meir holds your chayish l'misa. So the Tana that said that if I give a get, almanas that it should be megreshus 1 hour before I die, that's Reb Meir. We're choshed you're going to die. The Tana that said she can continue eating truma even though her husband went away is going according to Reb Yehuda, well, you don't die. You don't have to be choshed that someone's going to die. And the Gemara challenged that from the case of a lekeich yain ben akus. someone had to be mafresh trumas and maisos from a barrel of wine, but didn't have time before Shabbos to physically separate the different components out of it. He didn't time to take the truma out, take the meiser out, but he wants to drink the wine on Shabbos. So he could say, according to Reb Meir, he can say that after Shabbos, I'm going to identify which wine was dedicated for truma, which wine was dedicated for meiser, and of course, it's going to be wine that I don't drink over Shabbos. It'll be wine that I dedicate from the remaining wine. That works. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosy, and Rabbi Shimon, but our focus, of course, is on Rabbi Yehuda, says that you cannot do that because we're afraid that the barrel will rupture. And if the barrel ruptures, then I couldn't have designated any trumas and maasros after Shabbos, and kum t'chos l'mafreya, I drank tevel. So this seems to indicate that it's Reb Meir who is not chayish l'misa, because if Reb Meir is not choshid that a barrel will break, so he's not choshid for problems. So who adin, he shouldn't be choshid for misa. Yet Rabbi Yehuda, who says I am worried a barrel's going to break, surely I should be worried that someone's going to die, because not every barrel is destined to break, but every person is destined to die. So this is a direct contradiction to Abayi's suggestion. Abayi suggested that Reb Meir holds that you're choshit l'misa, but from this brayso of lekech yayin clearly shows that Reb Meir is not chayish and Reb Yehuda is chayish. So because of that, the Gemara said epuch. You'll have to say exactly the opposite. So Rashi says, what does epuch mean? Loi sheninu Abayi k'dekamrit. Don't say over from Abayi like you quoted Abayi, and that he blamed the shita that holds that she doesn't have to be worried that her husband dies and she continued to eat truma on Rabbi Yehuda, and the second brayso where she cannot eat truma on Reb Meir. Ela ibcha sheninu Abayi. You have to say that Abayi said the opposite. Ha de loy chayish Rabbi Yehuda, ha de chayish Reb Meir. Abayi cannot agree with the brayso of lekech yain. Abayi has to say, not from the brayso of lekech yain. He's not going to. He's going to have to ignore that brayso, and he's going to have to focus by him saying that Rabbi Yehuda is not chayish and Reb Meir is chayish. That's not consistent with the brayso of lekech yain. V'lav me halekech yain sheninu Abayi. Abayi didn't get his source for this halacha from halekech yain, because halekech yain tells us exactly the opposite. Elamehach the Sukka. Where did Abayi get his knowledge of who says what? From our sugya in Sukka, where Reb Meir said that you cannot use an animal, and Yehuda said you could use an animal. From there, he found out, in fact, that Yehuda is lo chayish, Reb Meir chayish, and from that information, he said the two braysos about a lady who's married to a kohen, whether or not she can eat truma or not. If there's a chashash that her husband died, the brayso that says she can't eat truma is like Reb Meir. The brayso says she could eat truma is like Rabbi Yehuda, which is consistent with our sugya. The problem is we still have a contradiction between our sugya of Sukkah, which makes Reb Meir chayish l'misa, and the brayso about lekech yain, which is Rabbi Yehuda's chayish l'misa. So therefore, we have to find for a steer in the braysos. So let's say epuch. First of all, as far as Abayi is concerned, Abayi said that Reb Meir is chayish l'misa and Rabbi Yehuda is lo chayish l'misa, and he knows it from our Mishnah and Sukkah, not from halakei yain. Titania also Rabbi Medoifin l'Sukkah Reb Meir Poshel Rabbi Yehuda Machshir. So that takes care of Abayi. Abayi's source is our sugya, but at the end of the day, you still have a contradiction between the sugya of Sukkos, where Reb Meir says chayish l'misa, and the sugya in halakei yain, where Reb Yehuda says chayish l'misa. So kasha de Reb Meir ad Reb Meir, we have a stira in Reb Meir. Of course, we also have a stira in Reb Yehuda, but we're going to deal with one at a time. Kasha de Reb Meir ad Reb Meir. Zok to Gemara, Amalach Reb Meir. Reb Meir said there's a very big difference between a behemoth dying and a barrel breaking. Misa shchicha. Everyone's going to die. I'm choshit that someone's going to die here, and that's why I don't allow. I don't allow you to use an animal for a wall. And B is a woman whose husband gave her a get to be chal sha'achas chazamisa. I don't let her eat truma. But the kiyas anoid lo shchicha. But why would we assume? Why would I be worried that a barrel is going to break? After the Moser Leila Shomer, you can put someone in charge. We're talking about this Shabbos. This Shabbos, you can have someone stand by the barrel the whole time and watch it, that no one bangs into it, no one hits it, nothing falls on it, and you can make sure that this barrel won't crack, and therefore I have no reason to be concerned. But you can have all the shomrim in the world. If someone's time comes to die, it's going to die. You can have all the shomrim in the world watching this horse, but if it's time for it to die, it's going to die. So that's why Reb Meir is chayish l'misa, but he's not chayish for a barrel breaking. For the more kasha to Reb Yehuda, Reb Yehuda is chayish that the barrel is going to break, but he's not chayish l'misa. How could you explain that? So tomorrow, time to Reb Yehuda, lav mishum de chayish l'bekiyas night. Your whole assumption that the reason why Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosy, and Rabbi Shimon hold that this does not work, this making Trumas and Rishos before Shabbos and separating them after Shabbos, it has nothing to do with their concern that the barrel's going to break. It's elam mishum de les le breira. It's because they hold you can't make this magic. You can't make something Truma now and identify what it is that you made Truma tomorrow. It doesn't work that way. And therefore, it's very possible when you were mafish truma in the barrel, it's undefined. It's not necessarily what you're going to determine tomorrow. And now you have truma and chulin murav and zebazeh. So then you can't drink anything from that barrel at all. And that's why they have disagreed. It has nothing to do with their concern that the barrel is going to break. Frank Gemara, if you look at the Lashon HaBraisa, it's pretty clear from the Lashon HaBraisa that is the reason why Rabbi Yehuda says you can't do it, because you're afraid it's going to break. And I'm going to prove it to you. Are you telling me that Rabbi Yehuda is not concerned about the barrel breaking? His whole reason to disallow this is because he doesn't hold a brera? But if you look at the Sefer of this Brisa, where they elaborated and you see conversation that happened between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir, this is what the conversation was. Rabbi Meir, so their very argument as to why they argue on Reb Meir is very explicit. It's because they're afraid it's going to break. So don't hack me a Chinik and say that they mean Breira. They didn't say Breira. They said their concern is it's going to break. So you see clearly that Yehuda's chayish l'misa. And you know what Reb Meir answered? Don't be so paranoid. I'm not worried it's going to break, and therefore I will let them do this Breira. But you clearly see that what was Rabbi Yehuda's opposition to Rabbi Meir? It's Mechlal Dechai Rabbi Yehuda L'B'kiyas Hanoi. The reason why he argues on Rabbi Meir is because he thinks it's going to break, which means he's Choshid L'Misa. So how could you tell me it's because of Breira? So Gemara, it is because of Breira. Hasam Rabbi Yehuda Hu Deka Amal Rabbi Meir. This is what Rabbi Yehuda's argument was according to Rabbi Meir. It was a multi-pronged argument. He said, Rabbi Meir, first of all, I completely disagree with you. Lididi Leslie Breira. I hold there's no Breira, so your whole idea doesn't work at all. Even you who hold that Breira does work, agree to me that here it shouldn't work. Because I disagree because of Breira. But even you who say you could say Breira, aren't you concerned that the barrel might break before you have a chance to separate it? And then it was Nimtza Eichel Tvelam L'Mafreya. And that Rabbi Meir said, don't be so paranoid. I'm not worried about it. It's not on empty yet. It's almost on empty. I'll make it to the gas station. Don't worry so much. Zog to Gemara. So now everything is clear because Rabbi Yehuda is not Choshid L'Misa, and he holds that the case of L'Kei Chayayin doesn't work because of Breira. For the Gemara, is that so? But L'Chai Rabbi Yehuda L'Misa? Are you so sure that Rabbi Yehuda is never concerned about death? But nan Rabbi Yehuda Omer, we learned at the beginning of Yuma that we're worried that the Kohen Gadol will be without a wife, and we know the Chiber Ba'adu Bat Beisa, he can only do the Avodah if he has his wife, and therefore Av Isha Cheres Maskiniloi Shemetamas Ishtai. We prepare a wife for the Kohen Gadol so that in the event he loses his wife on Yom Kippur, he has another wife. So you see clearly that we are worried for Misa. That's Rabbi Yehuda himself. So after Gemara, Ha'itmar Allah, there's a special reason why we do this on Yom Kippur. It's not that he's really worried Lamisa. He's not Choshid Lamisa. But Yom Kippur is such a critical day. It's such a critical day that he took extra precautions. Raji says B'kapara. I'm just sliding over to the right. B'kapara. B'kaparas Yom Kippurim Asaboy Mailazu. For the kapara of Yom Kippur, they made a special Maila. Shechashash Ba B'midi L'chayshbam. We had a chashash there. A chashash that we would normally not have. It's a chashash that only is for Yom Kippur. Zok Gemara. Bein Leman Da'amar Shem Atomus. Bein Leman Da'amar Shem Tivrach. Say if you understand why Reb Meir says you can't use a behemoth for a wall, is because you're afraid the animal might die. Say if you hold like Reb Zera, who holds the reason why Reb Meir says you shouldn't use an animal for a wall is only if it's not tied down, because the animal might just run away. Midaraisa, mechitza ma'al yehi. Midaraisa, technically it's a good mechitza. And the reason why we can't rely on it is because the Rabbanan de Gzeir, Rabbanan who de Gozerga. So let's go back and look at the list of all these things that Reb Meir says you cannot use for a wall. You cannot use a live animal for. So it's on Daf Chav Gimel Amar Aleph. The Gemara listed a whole bunch of things that you cannot use an animal for. And it says as follows. Reb Meir Omer called over sheyesh by ruach chaim, anything that's alive, which we know now because he's afraid it's going to run away. You can't use the animal as a lechi for a movi. Again, it might run away. You can't use it for passive because it might run away. But then there's like goyla lekever. If you use it as a cover for the kever, it won't be tummy because it might run away. You don't need a gzeira. You're being mako. You're saying it's not tummy. So how could you explain if the reason for a mayor is because it might run away? Why, if you used an animal as a cover for a kever, why is it not tummy? Frag the Gemara. If that's a svar of Rabbi Yehuda, and it's only because the rice it's a really a wall. If it technically is a wall, it's technically a good barrier. Well, then it acts as a goylul, it acts as a cover to a kever midaraisa, and it should be tummy. Why did we learn Rabbi Yehuda Matami Mishum Goylel, Rabbi Meir Mitaher? Why did we learn in a brisa that says Rabbi Meir is Mitaher Mishum Goylel? And everybody asks, Rashi asks, we just had a brisa on Amar Aleph that prompted this whole sugya. And over there it says that Rabbi Meir says it doesn't act as a Goylel. So why are we going now to ask him a new brisa where Rabbi Meir is Mitaher? We had the Mishnah on Amar Aleph. We had the Mishnah on Amar Aleph. We had the brisa on Amar Aleph, which started this whole discussion that says that Reb Meir holds not a goyel. So Rashi answers very simply and very beautifully. Rashi answers, really, the Gemara could have asked the kasha from the Brisa Amar Aleph where this whole Reb Meir was introduced. The Katani v'lo goyel lekever. So why did the Gemara decide to ask him this Mishnah? First of all, we'd rather ask a kasha from a Mishnah rather than from a Brisa. And number two is the oid mishum the katani mitaher behedya loshen kula. There it just says it doesn't become a goyel. Here it says beferish, it will be tahar. It's much more explicit, and that's why the Gemara asked on Reb Meir from this Brisa, from this Mishnah. El Amar Yaakov, why is it that Reb Meir says that the animal doesn't work for all these things? Because of Reb Meir, kol mechitza shaymedes beruach, any animal, not any wall, any barrier that's inflatable, anything inflatable, ain't a mechitza, it's not considered a mechitza. Anything inflatable does not work. Why? Dr. Rashi, the ikar amidasa davar shein be'mamishu. What's making it stand? What's giving it its rigidity? Something that doesn't have mamish. You know, whenever you drive by a new business and they're trying to attract attention, they usually have like a balloon with a fan at the bottom blowing into it, and it's usually like flopping over and standing up again, flopping over and standing up again. Something that's inflatable doesn't work. A human or anything alive that has a ruach chaim, we consider it inflatable. I've been called a blimp. Now I understand why. So Zok the Gemara, Reb Meir Omer called mechitza. I'm sorry. So that was the first shot. Anything inflatable cannot work. So therefore, an animal is inflatable. It's not a mechitza, which would make it a deraisa, which means all of the reasons why it can't be a wall for a sukkah and it can't be a wall for it can't be a lechi. It's all because it's inflatable. Inflatable things don't work. Ikadamri. There's another shot in what the reason for Reb Meir was. It has to be man-made. If it's not man-made, it's not going to be considered a good mechitza. And an animal is not man-made. An animal is created by the Rebbeinu Shalom. My benayu, where would it chapanach between these two reasons as to why a live animal cannot be a wall? Ikibenayu do ukma benoid tefuach. If you built a wall out of a balloon, imagine if you created an inflatable sukkah, a bouncy castle. You use a bouncy castle for your sukkah. It's an inflatable sukkah. If you hold that anything inflatable doesn't work, you can't put schach on top of the bouncy castle because the whole walls are inflatable. But if the whole problem is that it's not man-made, a bouncy castle is man-made. So we have here machloikis whether or not an inflatable sukkah could be a sukkah. If you're wondering, they've thought of every different type of sukkah. How come no one ever made an inflatable sukkah? Now you know the answer.
Yosy, it can't really mean that it's only a suya b'dei adam. You can use the side of a mountain for a sukkah. Nothing wrong with that, I would think. A rock, a cave.
Or how about a tree?
A tree.
Right?
Yeah, we had the cases, our own cases, in our Mishnah.
You're saying very good. You're saying very good. So let me see if anyone speaks about it. I did see someone who spoke about it, but I have to remember what he said. Let's see. Yeah.
That's not a universal psul of being man-made. What, I can't use styrofoam as a wall? Like one of those. I want to use there's my idea. The counter that I used to cover the counters on Pesach, I want to use that as my wall.
What's wrong with that?
There isn't. But if you're saying man-made, is puzzle.
No, man, it's required to be man-made, according to that Mandamar. It's required to be man-made.
The Ruach said
that's why the inflatable would be good, because
that's right.
That's what Rashi says. My question is, what's wrong with using it? The Mishnah asked the question about a tree, a sukkah in a tree.
The Gemara says, "But a tree, a sukkah on a tree is a problem with mishamas and balchaim, but you're for sure allowed to use a tree as a wall, eyes with the other. So it has to be a ruach with the other. The ruach with the other. Maybe the whole problem of man-made is only if it's a ruach. But if it's a hard thing, maybe it's good. But I don't know. You're asking me a very good kasha, and
so when you're saying an animal is not the other because we're not blowing the air into the animal.
Note 21 in the art scroll.
Oh, what does he say?
It says Rav Acha bar Yaakov does not mean that a partition must be actually man-made. Certainly, naturally formed walls such as mounds and boulders qualify as partitions. Rather, he means that to qualify as a partition, the wall must be something that a man could construct, such as a stone wall or an earthen embankment. He disqualifies the animal because its essential erectness
it can't be built by a person.
Not be made by him.
Unless you know how to build a golem, you wouldn't be able to make an animal.
What about Dolly the sheep? Yeah.
Right, Dolly. Isn't Dolly man-made?
Yeah.
No, the Rebbeinu made it. We just took one of them.
That was a Lego assembly using a Kodesh Baruch Hu's parts.
Victor, who does he quote from?
Tosfos and Erevin, 15a.
Okay, we got a chazer. I got a chazer. Okay, gewaltig. Zog the Gemara weiter. Shkoyach. Amar Mar. Mishum Rabbi Yosy Gluli Amru. They said in the name of Rabbi Yosy Gluli. Af ein koisen alav gitei noshim. You wouldn't be able to write the get for a woman on an animal. My time is Rabbi Yosy Gluli. What is the reasoning for Rabbi Yosy Gluli? The Tanya we learned. Sefer. Ainly ela sefer. I would only know if it says sefer. So let's look at the lashon pasuk. The pasuk says, "Do I have the psukim over here?" It says, "Ki yikach ishishu vala v'hayim leimsuchem einav ki matzah because of law." So because of law is important. Because of law, sefer karisos v'nosam biyado. So it says sefer, which means that it's a sefer. It's a klaf. So it's only a sefer. I would have thought that you could only use a klaf, but it says sefer. Minayin l'rab is called over. How do you know you could write the get on any item? Any ksiva is going to be good. If any ksiva on anything is a good ksiva, why does it Bechlal say sefer at all? Loy Malach to teach you. Ma sefer davar she'ein bei ruach chaim be'eino yochel. Just like a sefer is not alive and it does not eat. Af kol davar she'ein bei ruach chaim be'eino yochel. Something that does not eat is kosher to be forget to be written on. But if it's something that's alive and that eats, it cannot be used as a get. And Tosha struggles a little bit with like Mehechatesi to learn this. There's other times we learn to do the karka. There's different limudim. The Torah says that this is I guess what they had from Kabbalah. What you're supposed to learn out of these words.
No, it's even more than that. It's like you added ein bar ruach chaim ve'ein oichel. What, a ruach chaim that does eat or something that doesn't eat? What is it, a malach? You're going to write on it oichel ve'ein
there are two
omoisi?
symptoms of something that's not alive. Right. It's almost repetitive, is what you're saying.
Right. I don't eat both of them. Shad davar she'ein oichel, davar she'ein bar ruach chaim. Ein oichel, then it can be also the shade on the window that I never liked that she bought, right?
Right, that also would work.
I think it looks like that he's teaching it as like a machal, food.
I actually heard, no, I actually saw, where did I say? I thought at first that eichel means that it's not a food. It's not something that one could eat.
That's what I thought.
No, I saw from somewhere, I actually saw someone who said, because that's the pashut of pshat. I saw from somewhere who said bedavka that it means it does not consume. I don't remember where I saw that, but I actually saw that somewhere. I actually saw that specifically.
Because Akiva has a good point. What are you adding? What are you even adding here?
So I guess we'll have to. I don't know where I saw it, but I did see it somewhere that taich eina eichel means it cannot eat. We'll have to rely on the Victor to look it up in the art scroll again.
Note 5 in the art scroll says that the Gemara has not mentioned anything about food. The Mishnah in Gittin states clearly that Rav Yosy Glili disqualifies both living creatures and foods as writing services for a get.
Oh, so it is. I am wrong. So it is an eichel.
You had it right the first time. Yeah.
The Brisa quoted here, it gives Rav Yosy Glili's source for both meanings.
Okay, so I was wrong. I don't know where I saw it then.
Is this human food, so I can't write it on straw, or it's animal food?
Apple. You can't write it on an apple.
Yeah, but that's a regular food. Could I write it on straw?
You write it on, but you write it on a cloth. Food. The cloth is from an animal that you could eat.
Yeah, but it's not food. It's not consumable.
Not anymore. But you could take some. Yeah. You could take something else that's natural. And
I'm sure you can write it on a leaf. Nothing wrong with that.
So you're saying, so if you wrote it on a banana leaf, which is very big, that wouldn't be a problem because you don't eat banana leaves. It's not
on fruit leather.
Fruit leather.
Okay, a leaf is not food. Fruit leather is food. Okay. Zakt the Gemara about Rabban, and the Rabban says Shoy Chabig Rabban. Ikasav b'sefer kiduk amrit. It doesn't say v'chasav b'sefer. You should write it in a sefer, which would describe what you're writing to get upon. It says v'chasav sefer kiduk amrit. Then I would agree that the sefer is describing what the get can be written upon. But hashid the sefer, it says v'chasav Allah sefer krisos. It's not telling us what it could be written on. It's telling us what it is. To tell us that l'sviris dvarim ba'alma hu da'asa. It's coming to tell us that the get has to have a little bit of a story in it. In other words, the information on what's happening with this get. So Rashi says over here, "Eladivrei get kari sefer." The information in the get is called a sefer because it's sefiras devarim. It's describing the story of what's happening here. Karisus devarim sheyu karsin u'mafridin b'neiah. It's describing the transaction. That's all it means to say. V'Rabbanan zok Rashi, even the sefer lav klafu. Since the Rabbanan learned that the word v'sefer, the word sefer doesn't even indicate that we're writing it on klaf. So then why do I need v'chasav lafu? Hi v'chasav la yitzich l'rabbis called over. Only according to Rabbi Yosy Glili, that sefer is describing what it can be written on, which is very limited. Only a klaf. You need v'chasav la to broaden out the options. But according to the Rabbanan, where we have nothing limiting the options, why do we need the pasuk of a chasav? Rabbanan hai v'chasav my dar shebei. So tomorrow humi boilu b'chsiva miskareshes ve'ini miskareshes b'kesef. To teach you that the only way you can get rid of a wife is by writing her get. You can't do it with kesef. Well, the question, so I would have thought, since there's a hekesh from the kedushin of a woman to the gerushin of a woman, I would say mahavaya b'kesef, just like one of the methods of acquiring a wife is with kesef, af yitzia b'kesef, so to releasing a wife with kesef, kamash malam. So the question is, if gerushin would be b'kesef, how would the kesef work? Who would give who the money? So Rashi says, what it would be is, ve'ini miskareshes b'kesef, litin la kesef l'shem gerushin. You give her money, v'loimer, and you tell her harayat migureshes boy, kederech shenosam b'kedushin. Just like the kedushin works by him giving her money, So too, he would give her money to get rid of her. But there are those who learn you would look at like an Eved. When an Eved goes out the Kesef, the Eved buys back his freedom. He pays you. So the Rishonim will learn that the Havamini of the Gemara is not relevant because there is no Kesef to get rid of a woman. But the Havamini would be that the woman gives you money. Lamaisa, it costs you a lot of money. There's a lot more Kesef involved in getting rid of a woman than there is any type of Ksiva. But that's a different.
Ask Jeff Bezos how that works.
I don't know, Yossi. It takes a lot of money to get the woman in the first place, and even to keep her is also a lot of money. It doesn't end.
Yeah. Rabbi Yosy Aglili, high svara minole. How does Rabbi Yosy Aglili know that you cannot release a wife with kesef, only with a star? He learns it. It is because of law safer creases, and we learned that safer karsa, vein davaracha karsa. The only way to sever a marriage is through a safer. No other method works. So what are the Rabbanim going to do? They have this extra limit. Safer creases tells you that the separation of the get has to be something that creates a permanent severance. Kidetanya. But if there are strings attached to the get, that's not a kosher get. What is an example of strings that could be attached? If someone gives his wife a get, almanas that she'll never drink wine again. So now, forever and ever, she is still meshubah to him because she can't drink wine. So she's not completely severed from him. That's not a get. Another example of something that she remains tethered to him is if she said, almanas lo telchi lebeis avicha lo'elam. You could never go back to your father's home. So once again, she's tethered to him forever. Ein ze krisus. How about if she says for the next 30 days you can't drink wine, or for the next 30 days you can't go to your father's household? Then I raise a krisus. So that's what you need safer krisus for. So going back to Yosy Glili, how does he know this halacha? The idich mikaris krisus. It could have said v'chasav lo sefer kares. Why does it say sefer krisus? The shinu haloshin teaches an additional piece of information. The idich and the rabbanon karis krisus leidarshi. He doesn't hold you have that extra limit. So he just uses the safer krisus to tell you that davar karis b'neilah and therefore he doesn't use the safer krisus to tell you that safer karsa bein davar acher karsa. Toisus asks a bambidika kasha. Why is it that if he says you can never go back to your father's home, she's tethered to him forever? Once the father dies, there's no home to go back to anymore. So therefore, she's mugareshes. So why is this considered tethered? Right? The whole problem is that she's always mushubah to her. But once her father dies, it's not his house anymore. If his father sells the house, if he sells the house, it's not his house anymore. So why is it that tethers her forever? So that's Tosfos' kasha. So Tosfos says, Tema for Tosfos. V'ha v'emes aviyah loy chashivasu beis aviv. Once her father dies, it's no longer her father's house, and therefore she's no longer tethered because she can go back to that house without any repercussion. If I say I'm never going to go into your house, I'm not going to buy your field. Mace, if the owner died, or the owner sold it to a third party, mutter, now it's fair game. So this woman, once her father sells her house or if her father dies, she's now mugarashas. The base aviv kruin kol yetzei chalotzov shalaviv. It's not talking about the actual house; it's the household. If he says that you're never allowed to go back to your father's household, that is forever. It's still considered his father's household. You find this by Tamar, who was Yehuda's second wife. She was the daughter of Shem. Uchsiv, and Yehuda told her, Shvi almana beis avich. Go back to your father's house. She wanted Shelah, and he wasn't ready yet, so Yehuda told her, go back to your father's house. But at that point, if you analyze the psukim there, you'll see, in fact, that Shem had already died. And therefore, and Yehuda still refers to her household as Beis Avich, so you see that the household remains the same forever, and therefore it would not be a complete severance.
First of all, she had a chiyuv in Yibum, so it could have been a little different. I guess it makes it even more that there was a connection, and yet Yehuda sent her. The other thing is, I know this is going to be taken a little bit out of context, but if a person can acquire his wife b'keser shtar v'bia, why can't he also give her a get in those same three methods?
So how would bia work?
I knew you would ask that question. Harayat megureshes li b'bia zu. How did mekudeshes work? If it's good enough,
well, considering that the Chachamim weren't so keen on you doing bia for acquiring a wife, I can't imagine they would have liked it going the other way. And the Gemara there doesn't really like the idea of kedusha.
Right. I'm not saying that it does, but writing on an animal can't be much better.
But you have a pasuk from the Torah that tells you have to give her a get.
Sefer Karsa.
It tells you.
Yeah, but how you acquire is also learned from Sukkim. It says v'kansa. Right, so then we derive what the psukim are. If it's enough to acquire, it should be in. If it's good enough for buying, it should be enough for
you've got explicit. It doesn't. It says to acquire, do this, and to send her out, do this. It's very explicit.
Yeah, but we're makish havaya liyitzia. That's how we learn the shtar. If I'm not mistaken, we do make comparisons.
No, we're not makish havaya from shtar. That's maybe how you know by an evet. It says the chas of law sefer creases. It's very explicit.
When we get to Gittin, we'll get the Chazer.
Yeah, make a note.
Okay. Okay. Let's see the Helig Gemara right here. Let the Helig Mishnah. What if you built your sukkah in between trees? So unlike all the previous cases that we were discussing, where the Ilonis were supporting the sukkah or they were supporting the schach, here they're merely acting as walls. The schach is supported independent of the trees. Ksheira, the sukkah will be kosher. Rashi's bnei Ilonis ba'aretz v'lo samcha aleihin. Nothing's leaning on them. Aval hein doif neiseh. They're just acting as walls, not even holding up the schach. Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Kol mechitza she'eni yechayla lamoid beruach matzuya ena mechitza. This is not exclusive to sukkah. Any mechitza, like for Erevin, to make a rishus hayochid, if it cannot stand up, if it cannot maintain its position in a ruach matzuya, it's not considered a wall. Rashi says, what does that mean? Sharuach moilicha amevia. The wind blows it around. And Pashup Pshat means that it will, normally the wall has to come within 3 tefachim of the floor to be considered lavud. If it's in its natural state, it might be there. But if a wind comes and blows it, and now it's out of position, it's not within 3 tefachim of the floor, that's not considered a wall at all. Tanan, we look at the Mishnah. Our Mishnah, will be kosher. The problem is trees move around. Trees move in the wind. And since they move in the wind, they might also shift out of position. And therefore, how could you say it's a partition? Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov said that it cannot be a partition for any purpose. We're not speaking about bushes. We're speaking about Rashi, Ilonai Zekanim Vavim, mature, very rigid trees that don't budge at all. Frank the Gemara, but even if you're going to use trees as your walls, you're for sure not only relying on the big, thick trunk, you're for sure also relying on the smaller branches. And those are going to blow around. Well, you can there is the branches that will blow around. Rashi says, the Mishnah says very broadly, it doesn't say dafka the thick trunks of the tree. It's a broad statement, which means you would even be using the flexible part of the tree. You would actually have to tie down the branches that could potentially move in the wind. You actually weave the branches together, to make them into a rigid partition, and only then will you be able to use these trees as a wall. So then you've built a block wall pretty much. What is the chiddush of our Mishnah? That if you make sure that a tree and all of its branches are rock solid, that it's a wall, why wouldn't it be a wall? So you might think that we need to make a gzeira, that if we allow such a tree to be used as a sukkah, you might actually put stuff on the schach, put stuff on the tree, and that's not allowed. Kamash Malon, that we're not worried. If you have the schach resting directly on the tree, well, then we're afraid you might put something on the schach. But when the tree is merely acting as a wall, but the schach is completely independent of it, there we're not concerned that if you use that as a sukkah, that you're going to rest something directly on the tree itself. Toshma, let's have a seat. Let's have a look at this price. Hayisham ilam oigeder. Now this is speaking about pasebi rois. So this is where you needed to have the four corners surrounding a well. So it didn't have to dafka be four corners. If there was a tree there that was thick enough that if you would carve it, you'd have a wall at an amma in each direction, or if there was a stone fence that was thick enough that once again you'd be able to make it into a small corner where there'd be an amma in each direction, or mechitas hakanan, or if there was a fence, a picket fence, the halacha is nidai mishum diyomin, that will work as the corner piece that's required. So how could you say that a tree would work? Once again, if it blows in the wind, the tree would not be considered a mechitza according to Rabbi Acha Yaakov. So you also had to fasten it down, otherwise it wouldn't be good for the pasabirois. Toshma, we had this in Erin, a beautiful case. You had a big, beautiful tree with a tremendous canopy, and its branches that reach far out. It could be, let's say, a 50-foot radius. It could be a huge tent. The branches at the far end, the perimeter of this canopy, come all the way down to the ground, like some willow trees. If you go in the forest, you'll see the branches go all the way down to the ground, all the way around. So it literally builds for you an umbrella with a canopy that acts as a wall. So it says, if the perimeter of the canopy comes down all the way around with 3 tefachim on the ground, it's like it's a big gazebo. And therefore, metaltlin tafta, you'd be able to carry underneath that place if it was in the Rishus Rabbim. It makes you a special Rishus Yochid. And Rashi says, metaltlin taftov, the second of the wide lines at the bottom. Tamrin and Lovid, you'll say Lovid as if the canopy goes straight down to the ground. If you're standing underneath this tree in the canopy, it's actually 10 tefachim because the branches are high and they come down at the outer perimeter. The branches connect to the tree up high, and then as the canopy reaches out, spreads out towards the perimeter, then it goes down to the ground. So it's a big, beautiful canopy. So once again, those branches are blowing around in the wind. How could you say that they act as a canopy? Once again, you have to say that you wove those branches together and you fastened them. If that's the case, then it's a man-made house. A man-made house, no matter how big it is, if it's a man-made house that's made to live in, no matter how big it is, it's a Rishus HaYochid, and you can carry in there. So you should be able to carry in its entire perimeter. The halacha is that if you have an area that's hukaf ladira, if you have an area that's hukaf ladira, no matter how big it is, in the middle of a carmelis, in the middle of the nowhere, it's considered a house. It's considered shusayachid. However, there's a rule that if it was not hukaf ladira, if it was not surrounded and built to live there, then there's a maximum shear that it works for. Rashi l'taltal kulei. So I'm at the bottom on Rashi. Kloimer yataltal boy kol kama shugoda. No matter how big this canopy is, you should be able to treat it like a Rishus HaYochid. Alam Amar Rav Huna. Why did Rav Huna say that ain't taltal boy klal? Rav Huna says you're not allowed to carry in this canopy ella imkain einoi hava ela geshir beis osayim. The maximum amount of area that we would allow this tree to encompass to make it into Rishus HaYochid is beis osayim, which is the size of the Chatzar Mishkan. Anytime you have like a fence around an area that's not made to live in, like a fence around a field, the maximum size that the Chachamim say will let you carry in there is only a beis osayim. If it's a larger area that's covered, that's surrounded, that's enclosed by these gates, have a carmelis. Their abundance say we treat it like a carmelis, and therefore then it's like a carmelis, which means you can't move more than 4 amos. You can't carry more than 4 amas because we treat it like a Rosh Hashanah. High, but if you took this tree and you built it and you fastened it to make it into a shelter, even the Biyadayim Hukaf, since you actually had to weave the branches together to create a solid wall around this canopy, Uladira, and you made it to live under. So therefore, Afiluhu Yoser, you should be allowed to carry underneath the tree, even if it's more than the base of sign, because Rav Huna said you can't. Why is that? And for the Gemara, this was built not really because you want to live in there. Sure, you want to live in there, but you only want to be there to guard the fields around. The main reason why this was built was for the area outside of this perimeter, lishmar asados, to watch the fields around. So therefore, even though you built it solid and you wove the branches together, at the end of the day, you don't want to live there. You only want to be there because you want to watch the fields. And therefore, that's not called hook of ladira. And therefore, the maximum size that it could enclose, that you can carry in, would be beis hasayim. But if it's bigger than beis hasayim, then you wouldn't be allowed to carry there. So let's just do one more tashma. I'm sorry.
Are you saying that the tree is beis hasayim, or the tree is in a space that's beis hasayim?
The tree has such a huge perimeter canopy that it encompasses a beis hasayim. This has got to be a huge tree. A beis hasayim is about 70 amas by 70 amas, about 140 feet by 140 feet. So this is one huge tree.
So how do you build a sukkah underneath it?
We're not talking about a sukkah here. This is about making an area out in the field into a Rosh Hashanah, so you'll be able to carry inside there on Shabbos.
No, but we were discussing before about making the wall of the sukkah as one of the trees. I didn't.
Right, but not a tree with a canopy. To the contrary, you wouldn't be able to have that canopy there because the sukkah has to have schach under the sky that's not obstructed by branches.
Right. So this tree really has no leaves on one side. It's naked, really.
It would have to be that way.
Cut off branches.
Yeah, that's right. I know, Akiva, it's easier just to hire you to bring separate walls. I know.
No, I really would.
All of these difficult cases that we run into in Masechah Sukkah are just to point to one conclusion. Hire Akiva, he'll build you a proper sukkah without all these narrative.
Thank you for the promo. But somebody's going to say, I want to have that, what it says on halacha. I want to have a sukkah with trees as the walls.
But we'll soon get to the Gemara that discusses if you're allowed to build a sukkah out of matzevis.
Multi-use. You get the
cradle to grave. Zog to Gemara by the Tashma. Shabbos betel, Shavas betel shul gavoy asar. What happens if you ended up on Shabbos on a plateau? You had a hill, and the hill was 10 tefachim high, and using good asik, we look at it like it's surrounded with walls. And the hilltop that you're on, it's larger than 4 amas, because if it's less than 4 amas, you're for sure allowed to carry in it. Even if it was Rosh Hashanah, you can carry up to 4 amas. So we have something that's greater than 4 amas, up to a beis hasayim, because like we mentioned earlier, if it's like hook of ladira, if you just found yourself in an unenclosed space and you're there for Shabbos, the maximum size of an area that we consider enclosed would be a beis hasayim, or b'chein b'naka, shu amok asar, or you're in a crevice, you're in a valley that's 10 tefachim deeper than the area around it. So again, you have those artificial walls. And again, it's v'humei arba amas at beis hasayim. Or how about this? V'chein kama katsura. You're in the middle of a field, and you're at an area where there's a clearing where some of the large stalks of wheat or corn were cut down, and you're surrounded by a wall all the way around of stalks that were not cut down. V'shiboyles makifas isa. So you have artificial walls made out of these stalks. So once again, Mahalach Eskula, your Rishus HaYachid is the entire area that's surrounded by these artificial walls, and that's your Tchum Shabbos. And the halacha is you have your area, and then from your area you're allowed to go 2,000 amas in each direction. So that little enclosure is considered your area, And then v'chutzla or alpayim amma, you have a radius of 2,000 amas from there. For Gemara, there you don't either have by those stalks that are acting as your wall, they also blow in the wind. And therefore, how are they considered walls? That also has to be speaking where they're fastened down and they're made into a hard wall. So that takes us to the end of the sugya. But this is actually a very negei halacha l'maisa, because there's this Gemara that discusses what's considered a wall, and it loses the shem mechitza if it could blow around. The question is how far does the wall have to blow before it loses its shem mechitza? There's a machlokes, but most of the poskim hold that if it will move 3 tfachim when the wind blows it, that makes it ois mechitza. But Reb Moshe Feinstein has a much bigger chumrah. He says that's only to make it lose the status of a wall, which would disqualify it from being a wall for an Erev on Shabbos, like what we're discussing in our sugya. But when it comes to a sukkah, there's an additional requirement. That's Teishu Kein Taduru. So he said, if you have a canvas sukkah, even though it's fastened, the fabric is fastened to the frame all around, but if in a strong wind, it will push the center of the fabric out, right? The center of the fabric will be pushed out. Or even if a kid leans against the wall, or if you lean against the wall, it'll push out that area of the wall up to even less than 3 tvachim zakar Moshe, it will passel the wall. Because if Moshe holds, that's not called Teishu Kein Taduru. You wouldn't live in a house that has flexible walls. So therefore, Zakar Moshe says there's a huge problem with using a canvas sukkah, because if wind or someone can push out even the center of the wall where it's not fastened, it's a stretchy fabric. If you can push it out, that will passel the sukkah because it's not Teishu Kein Taduru, which means, according to Moshe, you probably cannot use a pop-up sukkah. But I think a lot of the pop-up sukkahs now come with a series of straps that you wrap around the perimeter so that you cannot push them out anywhere, or a series of maybe plastic strips, because according to Moshe, if any part of the wall is loose enough that you can push it out so that the center of the wall stretches because it's not, you're far away from where it's fastened down, Rav Moshe said that that's not a good sukkah. So that's a serious consideration.
The purpose of those straps isn't to reinforce the wall. The purpose of the straps is that they are the wall. Using lavud.
But that's only if there's enough straps that there's no 3 tfachim in between the straps. You went mute.
Akiva, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, there's your title for the daf. The answer is blowing in the wind.
But it's a very scary thing, because I never realized that there's such a shaila on these canvas sukkahs.
But we go in Flatbush and in Brooklyn, where Moshe lived, everybody had those blue and yellow canvas sukkahs. Everybody.
But is it possible that they had cross members in the frame?
No, I remember my father building it with just a frame of metal tubing.
Yeah, Mashver had
on
that.
top and on the bottom. That's it.
And the walls were flexible enough that you could push them out?
Well, you definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Moshe says even if the sukkah is in a sheltered area where there's no wind, since if someone would lean against it, it would push the wall out.
Ours was sheltered because we had it in the driveway, so it was between two homes. But so it never moved anywhere. But technically, it was like a sail. It could have been lifted off.
I want to ask Rabbi Lowy, because I was learning the Dirsha Mishabur today, and it's only Rabbi Moshe. Most of the poskim hold it wouldn't be a problem. Look, Rabbi Yashiv, the Israeli poskim, said it's not a problem as long as it's fastened down on the corners and the wall can't get lifted up.
Look at the
Moshe brings in the new thing.
They advertise those fabric sukkahs all the time. Those lighter sukkahs.
They also advertise the lay shade fluff. So,
What else do they advertise?
The lay shadels.
Oh,
Yeah, Victor, are you changing that? What is that? A parrot on your shoulder? Is that a monkey? Are you going to use that? Is that your new wall for the sukkah?
It's a little small.
Yes, but no. What Moshe is saying, it's Teshuvah Kein Taduru. People live in a tent all the time. It's not right. So if you're a tent guy, you're an outdoor guy. So then you can use it. And most people would live in a tent for at least a short time.
I don't know. I think when I get back, I want to ask Rabbi Lowy, because Rabbi Moshe does seem to say that it's very possible that now they have some cross beams within 3 tefachim of each other. Because the 3 tefachim is like 12, as long as like every 12 inches, you you have some cross beams that'll work.
How much is 3 tfachim in metric inches?
12 inches.
That's a lot.
My in-laws have one that has this, the Mahadran thing. So in the metal frame, near the bottom of the metal frame, there are, we call it hooks. And then there's flat straps that are about, I don't know, are they 3 inches each? I'm not exactly sure. And they run around the perimeter. And the straps are within gimel tefachim of each other. And
they run all the way up the side?
Not all the way up.
Up to 10 tefachim?
Just up to 10 tefachim.
Oh, that's how it works, Tucker?
Yeah.
Oh, so they actually deal with that.
So that's that. Yeah, mine doesn't have that, but my in-laws have that. So that's that. But those straps aren't to reinforce the wall. Those straps become the wall. The halacha.
That's right. Halachically, they're becoming the wall, and the canvas just allow you to be able to visualize the good asik.
There you go.
That's right. It's like if you want to see vapor. You spray. If you want to be able to see a
laser, you spray the vapor.
Spray vapor on it, and then you can see the laser. So they do that, so you can actually visualize the good acid.
The first year they got this sukkah. I put it together for them. Like, what are these straps for? They make no sense. And then I read the instructions, and it brought up the shaila. So this is how they.
Wow. The canvas doesn't go all the way to the floor.
The canvas goes all the way to the floor, but because the canvas could flap in more than 3 tefachim from the center. So you use these straps, the straps become the wall.
Wow.
But in my sukkah, the